The night was meant to be perfect. Soft lights filled the large hall, reflecting off shiny floors and tall glass walls. Expensive cars lined up outside, and well-dressed guests walked in with confident smiles. This was not just a party. It was a statement of power, wealth, and pride. The man hosting it was known for his success and his sharp tongue. People admired him, feared him, and tried hard to stay on his good side. Inside, music played quietly in the background while guests laughed and talked about business, travel, and success. Every detail had been planned to show luxury. From the food to the decorations, nothing was simple. Everything was meant to impress. Among the many people moving around the room was a young waitress. She wore a plain uniform and comfortable shoes, nothing fancy. While others sparkled, she blended into the background. She moved carefully between tables, carrying trays, refilling glasses, and cleaning small messes before anyone noticed them. Her eyes stayed low, and her face remained calm. She had learned long ago that staying invisible was the safest way to get through a night like this. She had worked many events like this before. Rich guests often spoke loudly, laughed without care, and treated staff as if they were part of the furniture. Still, she stayed polite. She needed the job. Tips from nights like this helped her pay rent and keep her life together. As she moved past one table, she heard guests talking about the host. Some praised his success. Others joked about his temper. Everyone agreed on one thing. Tonight was his night, and no one wanted to ruin it. The waitress paused near the edge of the room, adjusting a tray on her arm. She took a short breath, telling herself the night would pass soon. Just a few more hours, she thought. Then she could go home, take off her shoes, and enjoy the quiet. Suddenly, the music lowered. Conversations slowed. A familiar voice filled the room. The host had stepped forward, holding a glass in his hand. The room slowly turned toward him. Smiles appeared. Some guests clapped lightly. He began speaking with confidence, thanking everyone for coming and praising the success they all shared. His words were smooth, practiced, and loud enough to reach every corner of the room. People listened closely, laughing at the right moments. The waitress stood still, waiting for his speech to end so she could continue working. She wasn't really listening until she heard something that made her heart stop. The host laughed and said that the night still had a surprise. He pointed across the room, his finger landing directly on her. Eyes turned her way. She froze. "There," he said, smiling wide. "Our lovely waitress here has a special talent." The room grew quiet. She felt heat rush to her face. She looked around, hoping he meant someone else. But there was no mistake. He was looking straight at her. "She's going to play the piano for us later tonight," he continued. "I think it will be fun to see what hidden skills our staff has." A few guests laughed. Others exchanged curious looks. Some leaned forward in their seats. To them, it sounded like entertainment. To her, it felt like the ground had disappeared under her feet. She had never told anyone here about playing piano. In fact, she had done everything possible to keep that part of her life hidden. Music belonged to a different time, a different life. One she no longer lived. Her hands began to shake. She held the tray tighter, afraid she might drop it. Her mind raced. Was this a joke? Had someone told him something? Or was he just making fun of her, choosing her at random because she looked quiet and unsure? The host raised his glass again, clearly enjoying the attention. "Don't be shy," he said loudly. "Everyone deserves their moment in the spotlight." More laughter followed. The waitress forced a small smile, the kind she had practiced for years. Inside, her chest felt tight. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to say no, but her voice felt trapped somewhere deep inside her. She looked toward the staff manager, standing near the wall. Their eyes met for a brief moment. The manager looked away quickly, pretending not to notice. That silence hurt more than the laughter. The host finished his speech and raised a toast. The music returned. Conversations started again, louder than before. The moment seemed to pass for everyone else. But for her, nothing was the same. As she continued working, she felt eyes on her. Some guests smiled at her with interest. Others whispered, A few pointed toward the piano placed near the front of the room, polished and waiting. Her thoughts drifted backward, far away from the noise and lights. She remembered being much younger, sitting on a worn bench in a small room. The keys under her fingers felt familiar and safe. Music had once been her escape. She practiced late at night, even when the house was quiet and the power went out sometimes. She believed music could change her life. But life had other plans. Bills piled up. Responsibilities grew. Dreams slowly became something she couldn't afford. The piano lessons stopped. The music faded. Now, years later, that forgotten dream stood in the center of a room filled with people waiting to laugh. She served another table, her movements slower now. Her heart beat fast, and her mouth felt dry. She tried to focus on simple things. One step, one plate, one breath. A guest stopped her and asked jokingly what she would play. She smiled weakly and said nothing. The guest laughed and turned back to the table. The host watched from across the room, a satisfied look on his face. To him, it was just another form of entertainment, another way to show control. The waitress knew the night was far from over. Something had already changed, and there was no turning back. The piano waited quietly, and so did the eyes of the room. She didn't know yet how this night would end. All she knew was that she was no longer invisible, and that scared her more than anything else. The waitress moved slowly among the tables, her hands gripping the tray tighter than necessary. Every step felt heavy, as if the floor beneath her had become soft and unsure. She could hear snatches of conversations, the soft clinking of glasses, and the quiet hum of the piano in the corner. All of it was distant, almost unreal, like she was watching through a fogged window. Her heart beat fast. She had faced difficult nights before. Spilled drinks, angry guests, and exhausting hours, but nothing had prepared her for this. This was public. This was personal. This was a spotlight she had never asked for. She paused behind a tall table, taking a breath she didn't feel. The host had gone back to talking to his guests, laughing loudly, but she knew he was already thinking about the moment when she would sit at the piano. Every eye in the room would be on her then, waiting. She could almost feel their anticipation like a weight pressing down. The staff manager approached quietly, putting a hand on her shoulder. She looked up, hoping for a friendly smile or a word of encouragement, but the manager's face was serious. The warning was unspoken but clear. Refusing could mean losing the job. The waitress nodded silently, feeling a mix of fear and resignation. She didn't have the luxury to say no. She moved again, serving drinks, wiping crumbs from tables, all while her mind raced. She remembered her younger self, fingers flying across the piano keys late at night, the music filling her small apartment. That part of her life seemed far away, a distant echo she had buried under bills and responsibilities. She had once believed in her talent, had dreamed of playing for audiences who would listen and feel the music. Now that dream had turned into a threat, something others would use for entertainment at her expense. A group of guests laughed nearby, one of them leaning over to whisper to another. She could feel the eyes on her again, judging, anticipating. Her hands shook slightly as she poured wine into glasses. She hoped no one noticed, but it was hard to hide. A waiter passed by and whispered, "Are you really going to play?" She forced a smile, said nothing, and continued moving. She felt trapped in a world that wanted her to fail, and the panic in her chest made it hard to focus on anything else. The music in the room shifted, softening, drawing attention. Someone was tuning the piano, preparing for her performance. Every note felt like a reminder of what was coming. She stopped for a moment, standing near a table, pretending to straighten silverware while listening to the piano being tuned. Her stomach tightened. She could almost feel the weight of the room pressing down on her. A flashback came unexpectedly. She was 8 years old, sitting at a small upright piano that had been a gift from her parents. Her fingers moved confidently over the keys, playing a simple melody that her mother always said sounded like magic. Those moments had been her escape from the world, her safe place. She had loved the way music could tell a story without words, how it could express emotions that were otherwise impossible to show. But those days were gone. The piano had been sold to help pay rent. Her childhood dreams had been traded for survival. The present felt harsh in comparison. Here she was, expected to perform in front of a room full of people who didn't care about her, who might laugh if she made a mistake. She wanted to run, to hide somewhere safe, but there was no escape. She continued her work, moving between tables, trying to act normal. A guest complimented her smile, and she offered a weak one back, though her mind was elsewhere. She noticed a few guests glancing toward the piano now, some whispering, some raising their phones as if they were preparing to record her failure. The thought made her stomach twist further. At one table, a young couple was speaking loudly. The man said, "I wonder if she's really good. Could be fun to watch." The woman laughed, tilting her head, clearly amused. The waitress felt a rush of shame, though she knew it wasn't her fault. It was impossible to explain that she had once been talented, that music had been her life before the world pushed her away from it. The hours passed slowly. She refilled drinks, cleared plates, and moved carefully to avoid accidents. All the while, she felt the tension building. Every glance from the host, every whisper from the guests, every sound of the piano being tuned reminded her that the moment was coming. She could not avoid it, and the fear in her chest made it hard to breathe. The staff manager checked in once more, a small nod that said, "Get ready." The waitress swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the sound of her fingers on the keys, the rhythm, the melodies she had loved. It brought a flicker of calm, but it was fleeting. The weight of the room, the laughter, and the anticipation returned almost immediately. She continued moving through the crowd, trying to distract herself by focusing on the smallest tasks. Cleaning a spill, arranging silverware, checking a glass. Each step was mechanical, a way to keep her mind from spiraling. She could feel every eye on her, though, and it was exhausting. Then, a few guests started to gather near the piano, talking quietly, exchanging glances. She noticed some smiles that seemed friendly, but most were curious, some mocking. She felt like a performer being forced onto a stage without warning, without consent. Her heart raced as she tried to focus on something tangible. The tray in her hands, the glass she needed to refill, the crumbs she needed to clear. She reached the edge of the room and paused. From there, she could see the host, smiling, confident, completely unaware of the storm inside her. His enjoyment came at her expense, and she hated that she could not stop it. She wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, but the words would not come. Fear, anxiety, and the rules of her world had her voice locked inside. As she stood there, she remembered something her music teacher had once said. Music is a way to tell the truth, even when the world is unfair. That thought gave her a small, unexpected strength. She wasn't ready yet, not by any means, but the memory reminded her of who she had been, who she still could be. The room hummed around her. The sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and low conversation created a strange kind of tension. The piano sat quietly, polished and waiting. Every note she would play in a few moments would be watched, judged, recorded. The fear was overwhelming, but underneath it, a tiny spark of something else began to grow, hope. Hope that perhaps she could reclaim a piece of herself, even in this terrifying moment. She took a deep breath and adjusted her tray again, trying to appear calm, trying to pretend that the world hadn't just turned against her. The host made another joke, and guests laughed, unaware of the whirlwind inside her. She nodded politely, offered smiles that didn't reach her eyes, and continued her work. Inside, she was counting minutes, wondering how she could survive the performance, how she could face the room full of people expecting her to fail. She didn't yet know what would happen when she reached the piano, but she knew she had to keep moving forward, one step at a time, because there was no turning back now. The moment finally arrived. The host clapped his hands, drawing attention to the piano in the corner. Guests turned, some with excitement, some with curiosity, and a few with obvious amusement. The waitress paused for a heartbeat, her chest tightening as every eye in the room found her. She walked slowly, her steps deliberate. Each movement felt amplified, as if the world had decided to follow her every inch. Her hands were trembling, and her stomach churned, but she focused on the floor in front of her. One step at a time, she told herself. One step at a time. The piano loomed larger as she approached. Its polished surface reflected the lights from the ceiling, gleaming in a way that seemed almost mocking. She reached the bench and hesitated. Her fingers hovered just above the keys, uncertain and tense. The host leaned slightly forward, smirking, clearly expecting a disaster. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, trying to remember the feel of the piano keys, the flow of music that had once been her refuge. Her mind traveled back to the quiet nights when she played alone, letting melodies carry her through sadness, loneliness, and fear. Those memories offered a small comfort in the middle of the storm she faced now. The room went quieter as people noticed her presence. Conversations stopped, and the only sound was the soft rustling of chairs and the occasional murmur. Some guests raised their phones, thinking they would capture something funny. Others leaned forward, curious. She felt their anticipation like a physical weight pressing against her shoulders. Her fingers brushed the keys, soft at first, testing their feel. The sound was familiar, though a little stiff from nervousness. She drew a shaky breath, then let the music begin. At first, the notes were timid, almost hesitant, but with each passing moment, she gained a bit of confidence. The melody grew, flowing with an unexpected richness. Her hands moved across the keys with increasing ease, fingers finding their rhythm, the music unfolding naturally. The room shifted, laughter faded, conversations stopped. All attention was now on the music, on her. She could feel the guests' eyes watching her every move. Some faces reflected surprise. Others were open with admiration. The host's smirk faltered slightly, replaced with a look of disbelief. His plan to embarrass her was not working the way he expected. Instead, she was captivating the room. As she played, memories returned, blending with the present. She remembered the long hours of practice, the excitement of learning new pieces, the pride of mastering something difficult. Music had always been more than a skill. It was her way of expressing herself, a way to survive when words failed. Now it was her shield, her voice, her statement. Guests shifted in their seats. Some looked at each other in disbelief. The young couple who had joked earlier now sat quietly, captivated. Others who had expected a spectacle were suddenly caught up in the beauty of the music. Even the staff, watching from the side, held their breath. Her confidence grew. She began to play faster, more fluidly, pouring emotions into each note. The piano, once an instrument of potential humiliation, became a vessel of her strength. Her fingers moved with purpose, recalling pieces she had practiced years ago, each note striking a chord with the audience. The host tried to hide his discomfort. He leaned back, his confident facade cracking slightly. The guests, unaware of the humiliation he had planned, began to whisper among themselves, admiring the talent unfolding in front of them. They had come for luxury, for entertainment, but now they were witnessing something real, something moving. The waitress played on, her music filling the hall. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the melody reach them. Others leaned in, watching her fingers, listening to the depth of feeling she conveyed without a single word. It was a transformation. The person who had entered as a quiet, nervous waitress was now commanding attention, drawing everyone into her world. She paused for a moment, letting a soft, lingering note hang in the air. The silence that followed was profound. People were caught off guard, unsure how to respond to the sudden intensity of her performance. The host shifted uncomfortably, realizing his plan had backfired. The audience that had been waiting for her to stumble was now completely engaged, moved by her skill. She continued, changing pace, expressing different emotions through the music. Joy, sadness, hope, and longing intertwined, carrying the audience on an unexpected journey. Each note, each pause, each chord held meaning. She no longer played for anyone's amusement. She played for herself, reclaiming a part of her life that had been hidden for years. The guests began to recognize the effort, the talent, the history behind each movement. The room was no longer a stage for humiliation. It was a gallery of emotions, a space transformed by her music. The shift was palpable. Even those who had been skeptical now watched in awe, realizing they had underestimated her. Minutes passed, though it felt longer to her. She felt the music in every fiber of her body, letting it guide her. There was fear, yes, but also exhilaration. The spotlight she had dreaded was now a place of power. She was no longer just a waitress in a wealthy man's game. She was an artist, telling a story with every note. When the final chord resonated through the hall, the room remained silent for a heartbeat longer than expected. Then, slowly, applause began. Started small, polite, but quickly grew into genuine appreciation. Guests stood, clapping, some whistling softly, others nodding in admiration. Her heart pounded, but not with fear this time. She felt pride, a quiet satisfaction that no humiliation could take away. The host looked around, his expression mixed. There was no applause for him, only for her. The plan to embarrass her had completely failed. Instead, she had turned it into a triumph, showing courage and skill that none had anticipated. She rose from the bench slowly, her fingers lingering on the keys for a brief second. She allowed herself a small smile, a silent acknowledgement of her own strength. The audience's reaction washed over her, a mixture of relief, validation, and a newfound sense of confidence. As she walked back to her duties, her steps lighter than before, she noticed subtle changes in the room. Guests whispered with respect. Some glanced at her differently now, seeing not just a waitress, but someone capable of remarkable talent. The host avoided eye contact, perhaps realizing the lesson he had just learned. Her hands still shook slightly, but it was no longer from fear. It was the adrenaline, the excitement, the awareness that she had survived a moment designed to break her. She moved among the tables, her presence now marked by a quiet dignity. The music had changed everything, not just for the guests, but for her. The applause lingered in the air, a mix of surprise, admiration, and disbelief. The waitress sat back at the piano for a moment, letting the final echoes of the music fade into silence. She felt her chest rise and fall with a rhythm she hadn't noticed before. Fear was still there, but it was mingled with something stronger: pride, relief, and a quiet sense of victory. Guests remained standing, clapping, some leaning toward one another in quiet conversation about what had just happened. They had expected a spectacle, a moment to mock, but what they experienced was completely different. The music had transformed the night, turning a planned humiliation into an unexpected triumph. The host shifted uncomfortably, his face losing some of its usual confidence. He had assumed control, thought he could manipulate the moment, but the room no longer followed his script. The laughter that had once filled the air at his jokes was replaced with admiration for her talent. He took a step back, uncertain of what to do next. This was not the scene he had imagined. The waitress felt the energy in the room change around her. She rose from the bench slowly, careful not to draw too much attention, yet aware of the curious eyes following her every move. She walked with steady steps, her fear replaced by a new awareness of her own abilities. She realized something important. She was more than her job, more than the role others had assigned to her in this moment. Some guests approached her, complimenting her performance softly. One older man, who had been quiet most of the night, spoke first. "That was beautiful," he said. "You have a gift." She nodded, unable to speak for a moment, letting the praise sink in. The words felt heavy with meaning, far beyond the polite compliments she was used to receiving. They recognized her skill, her courage, and her humanity. Other guests whispered to each other, talking about her dedication and the depth of her performance. A young couple, who had joked earlier about the event, now looked genuinely impressed. They exchanged glances, nodding as if they couldn't believe what they had just seen. The atmosphere had shifted completely, from entertainment at her expense to admiration for her talent and resilience. The staff around her noticed the change too. Waiters, bartenders, and assistants who had once seen her as just part of the background now glanced at her differently. They recognized the power in what she had accomplished, even if she herself hadn't fully realized it yet. The quiet strength she had displayed resonated with everyone, a reminder that people often underestimated the ones they thought they controlled. Meanwhile, the host struggled with his own feelings. He had expected control and amusement, not respect and awe. His expression reflected frustration and surprise, mixed with a realization that his attempt to embarrass her had backfired completely. He had misjudged the room, misjudged her, and now the tables had turned. The performance that was supposed to be her downfall had become a lesson for him about underestimating others. The waitress returned to her work, moving carefully through the room, attending to tables with a sense of dignity she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Guests watched her, but now with appreciation rather than curiosity or judgment. She realized that this night, which had started as a source of fear, had become a turning point. She had faced a challenge, embraced it, and come out stronger. Her music had spoken for her when words could not. She noticed subtle smiles from some guests, their eyes reflecting respect and admiration. The sound of conversations returned, but this time with a tone of genuine interest and awe. People were discussing her performance, sharing their surprise, and acknowledging the skill she had shown. The piano, once a tool of potential embarrassment, now symbolized her resilience and talent. As the night progressed, the atmosphere remained transformed. Guests were no longer focused on luxury or social status. They were captivated by the demonstration of courage and skill. The music had reminded everyone present that true value comes from character and talent, not just wealth and power. The host, aware of this shift, quietly retreated into the background, observing as the energy he had tried to control moved beyond him. The waitress continued her duties with a new sense of purpose. Each task, from refilling glasses to clearing tables, felt different now. She moved with confidence, no longer weighed down by fear. Her presence was acknowledged, her strength respected. The night, which had started as a potential humiliation, had become a testament to her abilities and inner courage. She found moments to pause and breathe, letting the weight of the evening settle. Her mind wandered to the memories of her younger self, practicing piano late into the night, dreaming of a life filled with music. That dream had never fully disappeared. It had simply been waiting for a moment to resurface. Tonight, it had returned in full force, reminding her of her own power and potential. Guests approached her intermittently, some with polite compliments, others with genuine curiosity about her background and musical experience. Each interaction reinforced a sense of accomplishment she hadn't anticipated. She realized that talent, when combined with courage, could change perceptions, even in a room filled with power and wealth. The host, still observing from a distance, realized that his actions had inadvertently highlighted her strengths. His plan to embarrass her had inadvertently showcased her talent and resilience, creating a moment that everyone present would remember. The irony was not lost on him, and he could not help but feel a sense of grudging respect, though he would never openly admit it. As the night continued, the waitress maintained her composure, balancing work with the newfound attention she had received. She moved through the room with quiet confidence, aware that she had proven something not only to the guests but also to herself. The experience had reinforced her belief in her own abilities, her courage, and her resilience. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The initial tension and expectation of humiliation had been replaced by respect, admiration, and a recognition of talent. The guests left with a memory of a remarkable performance, one that transcended the superficiality of wealth and status. They had witnessed the strength of character and skill in someone they had initially overlooked. The waitress, though exhausted, felt a sense of accomplishment and pride. She had faced fear, navigated the pressure of the moment, and transformed what was intended as a humiliation into a powerful statement of her abilities. The night would remain with her, not as a source of embarrassment, but as a reminder of her courage and resilience. It had been a turning point, one that would influence her sense of self and her understanding of what she was capable of achieving. The night slowly drew to a close, but the impact of what had happened lingered in the air. Guests began to leave, still talking about the performance, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others smiling with admiration. The waitress moved through the hall, clearing tables and collecting empty glasses, but her steps were lighter now, filled with a sense of accomplishment she had not felt at the start of the evening. The host had returned to his private corner, observing the remaining guests. He avoided eye contact with the waitress, a clear sign that he realized his plan had completely failed. What he had intended as a moment of embarrassment had become a showcase of her strength and talent, one that no one would forget. He could sense the change in the room, the respect and admiration that now surrounded her. It was humbling, and he could do nothing to alter it. The staff around her watched with quiet approval. They had seen her courage and skill, and it had changed the way they looked at her. She had earned their respect, not through words or complaints, but through action and presence. She realized that her quiet determination had spoken louder than anything else could have. As she moved through the hall, collecting the last of the trays and tidying tables, she reflected on what had happened. The fear that had gripped her at the beginning of the night seemed distant now, replaced by a feeling of quiet pride. She had faced the unknown, confronted a situation designed to undermine her, and had emerged stronger. The music she had played was not just notes and melodies. It had been a declaration of her resilience, a statement that she would not be defined by the expectations or cruelty of others. Guests continued to comment on the performance as they left. Some expressed surprise at her skill, others spoke of the courage it took to perform under pressure. The room, which had been filled with anticipation and judgment, now echoed with appreciation. Even those who had come expecting entertainment at her expense left with a newfound respect for her. The waitress moved to the piano one last time, running her fingers lightly across the keys. The music that had once been a source of fear was now a reminder of her abilities, a symbol of the strength she had shown. She allowed herself a small smile, knowing that she had reclaimed a part of her life that she had thought lost. The piano, which had once been an instrument of potential humiliation, had become a witness to her triumph. She remembered the long nights of practice, the dedication, the sacrifices, and the love for music that had never truly faded. All of it had led to this moment, where she had faced her fear and transformed it into power. She realized that her journey was not defined by the expectations of others, but by her own courage and determination. The host finally left, quietly, without a word. He had been reminded that power and wealth did not guarantee control over others, and that underestimating someone could lead to unexpected outcomes. The room returned to calm, and the night ended not with mockery or judgment, but with respect and reflection. The waitress finished her duties, collected her things, and prepared to leave. She felt a sense of closure, knowing that she had faced one of the most challenging moments of her life and had turned it into a personal victory. She walked through the now empty hall, the echoes of the night lingering in her mind, a reminder of the strength she carried within her. As she stepped outside, the cool night air welcomed her. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly free. The experience had reminded her of her own abilities, her courage, and her resilience. She had faced fear, embraced her talent, and emerged stronger than before. The night would be remembered by those who attended, not for the luxury or wealth of the host, but for the courage, talent, and humanity of the waitress who had played the piano. It was a story that would linger in the minds of those present, a lesson in humility, strength, and the power of embracing one's own abilities. Walking away from the party, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Music had always been a part of her life, and tonight had reminded her that it could never truly be taken away. She had reclaimed her voice, her talent, and her confidence. The experience, though unexpected and daunting, had become a turning point, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one where she would no longer hide from her own abilities but embrace them fully, wherever life might take her.